Hey everybody. I'm so excited to be here. What an awesome day this has been so far. I'm so excited that we have 237 of you here ready to learn more about singing. And I'm also so thrilled and a little intimidated to be following up Nikki. I'm such a huge fan of hers, and I'm just happy to be on this panel with her. And I'm going to start today with something that is pretty similar to what you just heard from Nikki, which is in my work as a voice teacher, my first step is always to understand what the student wants to achieve. I'm hoping you can all see the screen. If you cannot see my slideshow, let me know in the chat. But that's always the first step. You know, if I'm working with a singer-songwriter or a barbershop tenor or a barbershop bass or an adult who's just learning to sing for the first time, all of them are going to have very different goals, and they're all going to understand where they currently are in their voice journey better than I will ever be able to. So that's always the first step. And then I become a partner in pursuit of those goals. I'm not the master teacher imposing my aesthetic preferences. I'm a partner to help you achieve the results that you want, whatever those results may be. And so that's always where I start. So as I go through my presentation today, I'm going to share some of my influences and some of the tools that I sometimes will use. And this has been really just a fun opportunity for me to synthesize my approach. But I just needed to start by saying every student is different, and my approach will change depending on who I'm working with and what they're trying to achieve. My influences, I have a number of influences. I'm most influenced by the McCloskey technique, which I'll talk more about in a bit. I'm also influenced by somatic voice work, the Levetri method, functional voice training, acoustic vocal pedagogy. All of these are just buzzwords to describe different approaches. All four of these approaches are grounded in anatomy and science, and that's a big part of what I do. But most importantly, I'm driven by compassion and curiosity. I'm always trying to figure out the thing that works, like Michael said earlier. What is going to work for this singer, and what does this singer need at this point in their journey? So let's jump in with this quote from David Blair McCloskey, which I think really accurately summarizes the approach or the perspective that I have about teaching singing. And the quote is, "The more we know about the human voice and how it functions, the better we shall be able to use it to its fullest as a means of expression." And what I love about this is that the goal here is expression, right? The goal is expressing an idea, expressing a message, expressing our personal emotions, whatever that may be. The goal is expression. But the way we get there is by understanding our voice, understanding the anatomy, bringing awareness of our body, mapping our instrument correctly, all of these things. Once we develop these skills, once we develop this knowledge, then we can best do the ultimate goal, which is express. And I think that taking this anatomical approach and understanding our body can help to sort of debunk this talent myth that is so pervasive in singing, especially, right? This idea that some people are born able to sing, some people are born not being able to sing. And that's just not true, right? Anyone can understand, coordinate, and utilize their vocal instrument for self-expression. Anyone. It just takes some skill building, practice, and courage, the willingness to share yourself and be vulnerable with the most personal instrument that we have. So everything that I do is all grounded. I try to make sure it's all grounded in anatomy, grounded in the science of the voice, so that we can just understand that this is just an instrument. However personal it is an instrument, and we can learn to use it better to achieve the results that we want. I'm not going to talk much about alignment or breathing in my presentation today, but when I do talk about those things with students, it's always from this perspective. I'm going to share three big categories of tools that I use in my work. This first one comes from the McCloskey technique, and it's the 6 areas of relaxation. You've heard a bit about releasing tension and how important relaxation is for singing already from some of our other presenters. And I like the 6 areas of relaxation because it gives just a bit of a framework for thinking about what areas might get tense, what areas we might want to bring focus to, what areas we might want to try to find some relaxation in. So there's these 6 areas. The face, if the face is tight or tense, we're going to not be able to express or perform as well. Also, singers will sometimes try to control pitch with their forehead. and that's not going to be that effective. So finding relaxation in the face is the first area, followed by the tongue, which you've heard a bit about already. Make sure that the tongue is not held or retracted or pushed up super high, that it's staying loose and flexible and able to make all of the sounds that we may want to make. The third area is the swallowing muscles. If you take your thumbs and go right underneath the chin and push up and then swallow, you'll feel those swallowing muscles activate. These muscles will often come into play when we're trying to effort up a high note. These muscles will pull up on the larynx, and if we can keep these muscles loose and relaxed, we're going to have more flexibility in our voice. Then we have the jaw, keeping the jaw loose and relaxed, not necessarily overextended or tight, but just hanging there, loose, able to move as needed to make the sounds that we want to make. Then there's the larynx, making sure that nothing is holding in or acting on the larynx, letting the larynx be free so it can make all the sounds that we need. And finally, the neck, which is, of course, very connected with alignment, making sure that the neck is not, protruded forward, making sure that the neck's not held rigid, that it's free, and properly balancing the head on top of the spine. And there are a few ways that we tackle these 6 areas. There is a sort of specific set of exercises that the McCloskey technique encourages, and I'll often start with those. But with any of these 6 areas, we can use movement to check that it's not tense. We can use, that might look like a little yes nod or no nod, moving the head around while we sing. And if we notice that the head wants to stop moving when we sing, then that's a sign that we might have a little bit of tension or holding in the neck. So we might find an area, have it move, and see if we can keep it moving while we sing. We might stretch an area, jaw stretches, tongue stretches, all of these face stretches. That's another way to release some tension. We can massage it when we're singing or when we're not singing. A little jaw massage, a little neck massage. I do a lot of this in my work. And finally, we can just focus on it and just being aware of it. Is it tense? Is it feeling tight? Is it feeling able to move? Is it feeling loose? Any of these four tools are the tools that we use to release tension in any of the 6 areas mentioned before, or even some of the areas that were not mentioned. So this is a big category of ways to approach the idea of relaxation and tension. The next, if we think of these 6 areas as the extrinsic muscles, the outer muscles of the voice, the ones that we can feel, the extrinsic muscles of the voice, the next thing that I'll work on with a student is the intrinsic muscles of the voice, which are inside the larynx, the ones that control pitch and registration and all that good stuff. And we aim to build a laryngeal flexibility. This is a big word to describe, being able to make the register, the sound, the pitch that we want to be able to make. And so we build laryngeal flexibility by first identifying and defining registers. This is a big heated topic in vocal pedagogy, but really there are 2 main ones that we'll use in most singing, which is the chest voice and the head voice. There are lots of different words to describe these registers. Chest voice might be described as TA dominant or thyroarytenoid dominant, thick, full, mode 1, all words just to describe a certain function of the vocal folds. Then we have head voice, aka CT dominant, thin, falsetto, mode 2, just different ways to describe a different function of the vocal folds. Nikki did a little bit of an exercise before where we were sort of mapping the vocal folds onto our hands and sort of showing what they're doing, right? And so chest voice is that thicker production, and head voice is that thinner production, where the vocal folds are a little bit thinner. Only the edges are vibrating, while the chest voice is the entire vocal fold vibrating. And this is, I tend to use chest and head just because it's most familiar, but really I like the idea of thick and thin because I feel like that describes it most accurately. So once we've identified and defined these registers, we'll isolate them, making our chest voices as healthy and sustainable and as free as it can be, making our head voice as all the same things, as good as it can be, isolating them. We'll do some work alternating between them. We'll overlap them, bringing up the chest voice higher, exploring that stuff, bringing the head voice lower, exploring that a bit, and potentially finding what could be perceived as a mix of registers. our registers are not actually mixing, but many singers can perceive what feels like, oh, this isn't fully head voice, this isn't fully chest voice, it's something in between or something different. And so once we've isolated, alternated, overlapped, and then we can explore other ways of using our voice, other perceptions that we may find when we're playing around with laryngeal flexibility. And so while those first two sort of tools are a little bit more technical in their approach, this third one is sort of the more artistic one, which is I'll use a ton of speech in my lessons, because when we speak, the whole point of speaking is often to communicate something, right? It's to communicate a message. And what else would we want to do when we're singing? We want to communicate a message, communicate an idea. And so going to the speech, how would we communicate this line of the song if we were just speaking it? What would the word emphasis be? What would the shape of the line be? Going to the speech can help us to sort of, find some good stuff there. It also can often facilitate efficient vocal fold function, because we get a ton of practice speaking, right? So we're pretty good at it. Most people have learned to speak in a pretty efficient way, and so bringing that into our singing often has some good results. And third, it can really help to bypass a lot of overthinking and overworking that often happens in singing. We think, oh, we need to make a certain sound, so we need to do this work, or we need to just do this and open up here, and we need to do all these things. And when we speak, we're not thinking that. We're not thinking, I need to breathe a certain way. We're not thinking I need to do any of these things. So bringing that ease, that simplicity of the speech into the singing will help us to sort of bypass that tendency to want to overthink and overwork that barbershoppers are so prone to. Some presenters earlier talked about, when we breathe, we really only need a speech level breath, right? We need a speech like breath. And so this is another way we might use speech, is to just say, okay, if you were to speak this, how much breath would you need? Oh, not that much. We don't need to overtank. We don't need to overfill. And I sort of blew through some slides here, but some final thoughts here is that I think the most common vocal fault, if you want to call it a vocal fault, that I experience or observe is just that we're using too much physical effort. We think singing takes physical effort, and it really should feel, like many have said, deceptively easy, weirdly easy. It shouldn't feel like a lot of work. And especially as we come out of this pandemic and we may not be quite as sharp on our voice as we used to be, not have quite the ability that we had before the pandemic. We may compensate by wanting to work harder and use more physical effort, and that's the exact wrong approach. The best thing you can do is to work one-on-one with a teacher, whether it's me or any of these other awesome teachers on this panel. Working one-on-one is well, you can find an approach to achieve the results you want with a whole lot more ease. I also believe that every student is different. Every student has different goals. Every student learns differently. Different instructions will work well for different students, and this is something that I think is so important for voice teachers to remember. And finally, I'm going to end a little early here, so maybe we have some extra time for questions. Finally, we must train the body, mind, ear, and heart to best help the students. We can't just train the body, right? Oftentimes I'll have a student who's doing all the right stuff generally physically, but they're just not getting the results they want because they're nervous to make sound, or they're worried about making a mistake, or any of that more internal stuff. And so we need to be, understand that the singing is a very complicated experience. It's not just a physical one. It's also a mental one, an emotional one, and so this is kind of my summarized approach, and I'm excited to have a little extra time here to answer some questions.
Thank you, Cay. We have a question from Rick. What is the most common cause for your students that needs to be focused on?
The most common cause for the students that needs to be focused on, meaning the most. Well, I kind of answered it a little bit, is just that working too hard. And so a lot of the work that I'll do is finding where is that work happening? What muscles are students using to try and get the result? Then we will relax those muscles, get them out of the way, get them operating how we want them to, and often that will get the results, get better results than working harder.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Jennifer asks along those lines, she'd love to hear more about exercises that identify and release tension.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, we got a couple minutes here. Let's just go through a couple of them. So, with the face, what I'll often do is I'll start by just a gentle massage with the pads of the fingers, starting at the forehead, and we'll start at the top. And as we leave the forehead, everyone can do this along with me. We want to leave the areas that we've touched already loose and relaxed, working our way down over the temples, under the eyes, up between the eyebrows, just letting all of this loosen and soften. And usually I take a little bit more time with that and just sort of going down through the face, checking the areas, feeling the areas. Are they feeling tight? Are they feeling held? Breathing throughout. We might also, there are lots of different tongue stretches. The one that I like a lot is this sort of floppy tongue stretch. So it's not a, stick your tongue out as far as it can go kind of stretch. It's you want to let your tongue stay loose and extend it out slowly, feeling the stretch almost from the back. So the tongue should be very floppy, very loose and big and floppy, not tight. You can even tap it a little bit, and it should move. It should move freely. You can shake your head. It should move back and forth. If it's not moving, or if it feels sort of tense to the touch, that's a sign that it's holding or that it's a little tense. So we want to find that looseness of the tongue. You can do this in a mirror. You can do any of these movements or tapping or stretches to sort of facilitate that. But we want to find that really soft tongue. And as Ben mentioned earlier, sometimes we might keep the tongue out and try and sing. If the tongue wants to pull back, maybe that's a sign that it's a little tight. Skipping down, one that I really like a lot is the little yes nod. So let's all do this. Just a little, very gentle up and down, head balanced over the spine. Now all I want you to do is start to sing. Just make a sound. And you'll notice maybe, potentially, that your head wanted to stop, or it wanted to tighten, or it wanted to do something. And all we got to do is just train the head to sort of stay loose, still moving, and see if we can make a sound while not losing that movement. If it's moving, then it's not going to be tense. So those are just a few examples of ways to sort of identify tension and look to release it. Movement, stretching, massage, focus, all of that.
Very helpful. A question on what do the vocal folds actually do? Like, how do they look when using the so-called mixed voice?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the mixed voice, the reason why it's very much in quotes is that there is a shift in sort of which muscles of the vocal folds are dominant in their action, depending on the registers. But if we think of the voice as sort of a hand, and if you were to sort of clap with all 5 fingers, that's sort of our chest voice. It's very loud. It's a thick sort of sound. Now let's clap with just 1 finger. Right? It's quieter. It's lighter. That might be more like a head voice. Now clap with 3 fingers. Right? All of those are different sort of ways to think about what the vocal folds are doing. Is it a thick mass, very firm vocal fold closure? Is it sort of in between, maybe a lighter chest voice? Is it a really thin head voice, or is it a little bit of extra mass added to that head voice? All of these are sort of options. Obviously, we can't directly tell our vocal folds to do this, but we can have the acoustic goal. We can sort of have an idea of the sound or the feeling that we want, and our vocal folds will respond by giving us the formation that gives us the sound that we want. And so once we've freed up the extrinsic musculature, that allows the intrinsic musculature to have that flexibility, that ability to give us the sound that we want, whether that's mixed voice or chest voice or head voice. Great question, hard question to answer in the time that we have.
Right.
Yeah.
This question from Jeannie, she sings bass and find that most exercises are sung in head tones. Should bass exercises be any different?
So I think it's helpful for That's a great question. Yeah, I think bases especially, uh, more so, assigned male at birth bases, they're used to having exercises that work in chest voice. But if you're experiencing voice exercises that work in head voice, that's great. We want to be exercising all registers no matter what part you sing. I think it's really important for bases to have comfort in their head voice just as much as comfort in their chest voice. So I think to answer the question, do exercise in all registers and explore all registers no matter what part you sing.
Really good information. What was the name of the method you use? Someone asks.
Sure, yeah. The McCloskey technique is the primary one. If you're interested in learning more about it, there's a book. It's a really short book called Your Voice at Its Best, sort of written by David Blair McCloskey and some of his students. I work with a McCloskey master teacher myself. That's my training. And I'm at the next opportunity, I sort of got into it right after their certification program started, but at the next opportunity, I'm planning on pursuing my certification with the McCloskey Institute. Yeah.
Somebody asks, can you speak to sound focus as it relates to volume, sound quality, vocal efficiency?
Sound focus. Yeah, so sound focus, I think maybe is perhaps more of a perception, right? You will perceive the sound in a certain place, or you can even sometimes have that perception of focusing it in a certain place to get a result that you want. I tend to avoid trying to tell singers to focus a sound in a certain place, just because that's so individualized and it will work for some people and won't work for other people, and can often have side effects of adding tension in other places. I do notice sort of acoustically when we're more in a chest voice or lower in our voice, we will feel more perception sort of in the mouth. And then as we get higher, we will feel more focus sort of maybe in the back of the head or higher. But this is just perception. And we want to allow that perception to change, and we want to, the sound can focus, can move. We want to allow that to happen. We don't want to try and force it to stay in a certain focus. If that answers the question. What an interesting question. Thank you.
Yes, that's great. There was a question earlier today we didn't have time for about what some people refer to as a girly sound, or in the case of male voices, perhaps a thin sound. So it's about resonation and how we can help singers who might be in that category.
So the question is just what
Not you about folks that are not able to use their full sound.
Oh, sure. Well, I think head voice, and both from a laryngeal perspective, and also perhaps from an acoustic perspective, which I don't have enough time to get into. But when we're higher, right, our voice does have it ends up thinning out a bit, and that's sort of natural, right? And we can use different resonance strategies to avoid that, or to have a different result. I think, let's see, if you're singing high and feel like it's too thin, I would first ask you to look at these extrinsic areas. Are they tight or are they loose? Are they holding the voice and not letting the voice operate as freely as it wants to? Maybe we need to just spend more time in the head voice, getting more comfortable with it, freeing it up. If we're uncomfortable in the head voice, as a lot of AMAB singers, assigned male at birth singers are, if we're uncomfortable there, when we start to do that work in the head voice, sometimes it can feel really thin, really light, almost breathy. And we need to allow that to be how it is at the start. And over time, it will learn to coordinate. It will become more easy. It will develop sort of on its own if we're following the process of tension release and great alignment, easy airflow, all of this good stuff. Over time, it will coordinate and become more full as we just isolate it and get comfortable in it. So that would maybe be my advice for that.
A lot of wonderful questions and even more appropriate answers. Thank you, Cay, for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you all so much. I look forward to the roundtable tomorrow.